gods, but other people, nobody knew about them. Nobody would go see them.
Well, I wouldn't disagree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the old guys had no connection with where the music was popular now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So occasionally somebody from Chicago or Berkeley or New York or Boston or Ann Arbor who was knowledgeable enough about the music would know where to go to ask somebody who could ask somebody else where to locate this person, and then hire them for, I don't know, the University of Chicago Folk Festival,
right,
the Friends of Old Time Music in New York.
Right.
But that connection was, as you say, kind of limited.
Yeah.
There was no reciprocal method by which the Hobart Smiths and Frank Prophets could really reach out and call up this coffee house or that coffee house and know how to promote themselves.
Right.
They needed an intermediary. This is particularly true of a lot of the old blues guys.
Yeah.
There were a bunch of folks from Boston and New York who went down and dug up these guys like Son House and Mississippi John Hurt.
Right.
And almost made it like a religious calling for themselves
mm-hmm.
to go out and promote them among the coffee houses that were scattered across the country.
Right.
So you can find people who grew up in Indiana or Idaho, and there were local coffee houses, and they'd be able to go and see John Hurt.
Right.
Because they had people who knew how to push those guys. But the other folks, Frank Ashley and all the other old-timey guys, really couldn't do that. Doc Watson was an exception because he had somebody who...
He had Ralph Rinsler.
Yeah,
exactly. Doing that from the start.
Right, and also doing it later for Bill Monroe.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But you look at these other guys, and they were doing the circuits around South. Somebody like the Stanley Brothers, for example,
yeah, very
rarely got up north because they didn't have somebody who was pushing their interests up here.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a shame, because if somebody could have made themselves a very nice living, I think, if they were willing to be like a Manny Greenhill,
mm-hmm.
but on a more traditional level, pushing traditional artists.
Right.
But then you get into that other argument about, well, the music is kind of dying and the venues are dying and people want to listen to rock and roll, and can you really make a living at that?
Sure. How long did you continue as the Spark Gap Wonder Boys?
Well, it kind of died out around I got to think about this for a second. Probably around 72.
Okay.
That would have been the last, 72 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, I got a job with David Bromberg.
Right.
And I toured with him for a while, and I wasn't able to do any more gigs with...
And I keep wondering, since I always wondered, I was at SUNY Binghamton from 72 or so to 76, where I saw this wonderful David Bromberg concert on campus, and I've been wondering if I could have seen you around 75 or so.
Well, it's possible.
Okay.
I played with him for all of 72 and about half of 73, and then did a bunch of other gigs with him periodically.
Okay.
Up to about 74 and 5.
Okay.
So it's possible.
So at that time, obviously, you were thinking you were a musician, and you were a road musician, I guess.
Well, I don't know.
Okay.
I was always torn between wanting to be a professional academic
mm-hmm.
and be a musician.
Okay.
And I would do one, and then I would get really bored with it, and I'd want to go and do the other, and then back and forth.
Right.
I spent a lot of time off and on in grad school.
Uh-huh.
Kind of, I ended that period when I couldn't get a job teaching because I didn't have a terminal degree.
Right.
And I wound up just doing music for the fun of it and getting a variety of other straight jobs.
Right. Was there ever talk of a second Spark Gap album?
Yeah, but I don't know how serious it was, because by that time, Dave Dubélé had gone off to be, super photographer.
Mm-hmm.
He really didn't have time to do anything else. He was just doing traveling all over the world doing underwater photography.
Okay.
Hardly touched his banjo.
I see.
And George Nelson, he was actually playing professionally with a country band for a long time, so he didn't really have time to do
Right.
band music.
Right. Did you keep in touch with Ken and Bill and Marion in the years following the release of your record?
Yes, periodically we would do that. I would run into them every so often. I was by that time living in New York, and they were in Boston, so we would only see each other at. I remember running into the three of them at the NAMM show one year in New York, National Association of Music Manufacturers.
Yeah.
And periodically I'd run into them at a folk festival, But it's not like we called each other 3 or 4 times a year to just bring ourselves up on what was.
Well, I guess were you aware of the label's growth? This fledgling company that recorded you with no product out. Suddenly, were you following that at all?
It was impossible to be unaware of it.
Okay.
They were getting reviewed in places like Rolling Stone, for heaven's sakes, and lots of other places. Talking about the Rounder Collective and all of the things that they were doing musically.
Right.
And you were also starting to pick up on some of the. I don't know. I wouldn't want to call it dirt, but you had alluded to the labor problems they were having.
Sure.
And you'd hear about that too.
Yeah.
So there was the good and the bad, but everybody was recognizing that they were doing terrific things for independent music, and how they were in the forefront of wresting control of real music away from the big record companies. I remember when talking about George Thorogood, when they had their first big hit.
I was going to ask you about that.
That almost changed Rounder irrevocably, because they didn't know how to handle such a monster hit.
Right.
That guy.
Right. What did you think of them doing that release, and what did you think of? I don't know what your other tastes are, but I was just curious. What did you think of Rounder suddenly on top 40 radio with this essentially rock and roll record, albeit blues based?
I had said more power to them. I could see what they were doing with their other releases, and they were still doing powerful bluegrass and old-time music and
right.
Traditional ballad singers. That stuff was all there. They were just expanding. They had a subsidiary blues label, and they had some ethnic music that was coming out. So they were just trying to expand their market. That was a tough road to hoe, just trying to get distribution.
Yeah.
I remember them going through all kinds of hassles with, I don't remember the name of the distributor, but there was some big distributor where they were trying to get their product distributed through this other big-time distributor who was doing the Columbias and the RCAs and all of those, and they were having a hard time getting their product in the store, and that led them to do their own distribution company.
Right. Right. Did you talk to them about this? Were you concerned about distribution of your record and how they were selling? Did you follow things like?
No. At that time, we were just so happy to have a record out and to see it in the stores in various places. You walk into, I don't know, Briggs and Briggs in Harvard Square, and you could see your own album there.
Right.
I remember once going down to New York City and whatever the big store, Tower Records.
Yeah, probably. Well, Sam Goody or Tower.
Sam Goody or Tower Records, and going through the folk section and seeing the album there. I said, oh, that's cool. Made it to the big time.
Right.
I had no problems with them, the way that they were distributing, because we knew that it was never going to be a smash hit. It wasn't going to hit the top 40.
Right. Right. Now, when you, I guess, in the 70s, one of the biggest old-timey bands was the Highwood String Band, which was a rounder act, which generated a lot of excitement. Do you know those guys, or were you any of them?
All of them.
Okay. And were you kind of a follower of them back in their heyday when they were touring so much? And they did. I guess they did 3 rounder albums in the 70s. They've kind of truncated them now onto a disc. But
we knew all of those folks and had played music together at one time or another. and remember talking to them about the difficulties of being on the road and trying to make your living with this kind of music, and commiserating with the shared experiences of living hand to mouth.
Right.
Music. There was a time, in fact, let's see, this would have been, 76 perhaps, 77, when I was out of grad school and I was trying to make my living through music, teaching and playing. And a friend and I, his name is Tom Axton, were trying to figure out ways to promote ourselves. And we came up with this idea of a book that we could send to college promoters who had coffee houses or little on-campus venues that would have all these independent artists who were trying to make it on their own, who were not represented by agents, so that folks could contact them directly. We called this thing the booking book. And we had a whole bunch of people in it. We had, I was in it as a solo act, Tom was in it, the Highwoods was in it, Barbara Carnes. I'd have to go and dig it up now, but there were 4 or 5 other acts. And we all contributed cost to producing this book. And it was just like a little, maybe 4 inches by 8 inches. And we put a little hole in one corner so it could be tied up on a wall with a string, and you open it up, and there was everybody's phone number and address. Easy to get to. And we made back our costs on it. And I remember Highwoods being kind of excited about that. Another way to get into colleges, and they weren't able to get there. We pooled all of our contacts so that we were able to send out, 400 of these.
Right.
It worked out pretty well. But yeah, we had touch base with Highwoods over a period of years, and they managed to stick it out for a long time.
Yeah.
Sure did.
Right. Do you have? I guess when did this come about? Do you recall? I don't know if you read Old Time Herald or half from the beginning. Do you recall the kind of print war that Mac Benford had going on with Joe Wilson?
It rings a vague bell. I don't remember the details.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. I think. Well, you're not going to remember. Mac had written an article bemoaning the fact that government-funded programs such as Joe Wilson's folk arts program were drawing harsher lines with respect to hiring what they called revivalists. And Joe was given an incredible amount of space to respond, and he wrote an article that generated letters for months, which essentially said, I'm not going to be Highwood String Band's booking agent. And I'm concerned about the true vine, so to speak. I mean, Joe likes his connections with East Tennessee.
Yes.
All right, but in any event, it rings a bell, but you don't have a strong sense of it. You've still got your hand in. How do you feel the scene compares today to what it was in the 60s and 70s? Are you aware of the old-time musicians now that are out there on record and touring about?
Yeah, I absolutely am. Both old-time and bluegrass. And I think right now is a very exciting time for all of these people.
How so?
Traditional music goes through these boom and bust periods. In 50s, early 60s, it was the folk scare. And then, long about, early 70s, we had another revival in traditional music. There was another one 10 years later. In the 90s, we had another one. And each time these come through, we don't lose the people who were the converts from the most recent turn. We gain a few more.
Right.
And, I go to some of these concerts now, the festivals that have been going on for 15, 20 years, and I see lots more people coming in to enjoy this music and appreciate it for what it is. And I'm really getting the sense that there's an appreciation of the music on its own that I was not getting before 15 years ago. I don't know if I'm being real clear about this.
Well, I understand you, sure.
Now, I don't know how closely you read the bluegrass list, but there's an ongoing argument on there right now about that touches on something you mentioned at the very beginning of this conversation, and that was, how do you promote this music?
Right.
And it's really more, how much do you want to promote this music before you destroy it?
Mm-hmm.
And with the recent success of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou,
Mm-hmm.
There are a group of people who are saying we shouldn't be losing this momentum. I mean, this thing went platinum. They sold 1.5 million CDs
Right.
just in the United States. That doesn't even count Europe.
Yeah.
Anybody who isn't riding the coattails of this phenomenon deserves to be unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the other school of thought that's saying, if we let this get to be too big, then it's going to get to be homogenized music, and it's going to get absorbed by the music industry monster.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody has won this argument yet.
Right.
Every time one of these movies comes out, it's a perpetual discussion, and I don't know what the answer is, but I think to some extent, yeah, you do follow along and you try to promote this music because people listen to something like that, and the way they're responding to it, you can almost see that there's like a sea change going on. Oh yeah, they understand. They're willing to listen to the Stanley Brothers sing Angel Band on this CD.
Right.
They're willing to listen to Field Hollers.
Yeah.
First cut on that CD.
Right.
And you can even hear this being played on the radio, on top 40 country radio. When was the last time that happened? So
Right.
we should be out there pushing our music. The record companies, the Rebel Stargaze Rounders, should be buying airtime on these country stations to push their latest country act, who happens to be playing in the area.
Right.
I don't know. This argument is going on back and forth. But I do see a lot more people who are interested in the music now,
Mm-hmm.
who were not before. I see a lot of people who are getting fed up with what's called country music nowadays.
Right.
Because it's a little too slick and stylized. It's almost like 70s pop music with cowboy hats.
So, well, Nashville is doing badly now. It was doing riding high in the mid '90s, I guess, but it's taken a huge dive, and there's tremendous concern about it.
Yeah, there is.
And they don't know what to do. I think the executives are at a loss right now. They're all kind of worried about their jobs.
Well, they should be.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't hurt to have a shake-up.
Yeah.
And have something new happen. And that would be a real good time for the Rounders and the other independents to be kind of pushing their music in.
Right.
That kind of gets into a discussion about how you promote the music, which is another thing that you were talking about early on. And I see a lot of people looking at alternatives for this, and I don't know how successful they are, but for example, bands promoting their own albums with MP3s,
Mm-hmm.
sticking them up on the web. And sometimes they're full cuts, sometimes they're just little snippets.
Right.
There's all kinds of interesting ways that people are promoting.
What kind of other things come to mind? Have you seen? I'm curious.
Well, I see a lot of people doing demo CDs because they've gotten real cheap
Mm-hmm.
to do
Okay.
now, and sending them out.
Right.
A lot of websites, obviously.
Right.
It's a real simple, easy way to do it. I think some bands, not all bands, but I think some bands are becoming more sophisticated about how they promote their own music.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of amateur bands, it's been more like a labor of love. They do it because they enjoy it, and every so often they'll go and play at the local pizza parlor, and that's their gig. But they don't really think about promoting themselves and improving the band. And I think that there are a number of bands that are being more that are looking at themselves with a more objective eye and attempting to be more professional in the way that they present themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't necessarily mean stage presence and fancy costumes, but more like, what does our publicity package look like? do we let people know where we're going to be playing, and being more, what's the word I'm looking for here, more methodical about making sure that all of the local papers have announcements for where they're going to be playing, and there are posters up, and that you contacted all the local radio stations who will do the free promo announcements or who have concert listings. There's lots of ways that have been overlooked in the past, and I think the people are getting a lot more sophisticated about it now. There's a lot of small festivals, particularly up in this area. Maybe it's not so much down south, but around here I'm noticing a lot of smaller new festivals coming up, and they're really quite local festivals where they'll draw people from, say, a 30-mile radius, and they'll bring in a bunch of local bands and maybe one or two regional or national acts, and it's just like it's a good time. It's a good place for families to go and just have a good time outside and listen to music. I'm seeing a lot more of those kinds of festivals now. I'm not sure how that relates to the promotion of the music itself, but I see this as an expansion of the venues.
Sure.
And maybe it's people just becoming more aware of the music through other means. I don't know.
Another huge debate that's also ongoing is, I guess I'd call it the strict preservationists versus more innovators in terms of presentation of the music itself.
That's always fun.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that and what's going on? I mean, it's funny, you got turned on to the music by the Osborne brothers, who were... now, of course, they're revered old bluegrassers, but they were, of course, they were criminal innovators in even the 50s.
Well, at the time that I was listening to them, I guess they were on the edge of traditionalism, because they were doing harmonies, and Sonny Osborne was doing banjo backup that nobody else was doing. It was really quite sophisticated for its time, if you listen to it in its context. And of course, by the time we got into the mid and late 60s, early 70s, they were doing amazingly far out stuff.
Yeah.
With electric bass, and they had backup singers and pedal steel, and he had a six-string electric banjo. And I had a hard time listening to them during that period, but I still appreciated them as musicians, and I was aware that they were just trying to make a living at music at a very hard time for traditional musicians. So I could understand where they were coming from.
Right.
You probably were reading the vitriol that was in Bluegrass Unlimited at that time about the Osborne brothers and how they were traitors to the music.
Yeah, I've gone back. I've read all that stuff, actually.
I remember it fondly.
I had to, in fact, I had to go to the Library of Congress to find some of those, but I read them all. I just started at number 1 and went through it. It's funny, but it's funny is that the stuff goes on today. There was a recent, I guess it wasn't too recent nowadays, but after the last IBMA conference, there was a complaint on Bluegrass L about the presentation of Alison Brown's band and the fact that she used drums. And you go back to Bluegrass Unlimited from 1966, and there's some angry letter about drums. It kind of never stops. Where do you fall down? I guess the ultimate question that I sometimes ask people is, does Bela Fleck belong at a bluegrass festival anymore?
I'd be happy to go and listen to Bela Fleck anytime he wants to play.
Okay.
Boy, that guy's such a musician.
All right, so if he's on a bluegrass festival, it doesn't offend your aesthetic or your purity or your...
Well, I prefer traditional music. I prefer the traditional presentation, but I can appreciate people trying to expand the boundaries of the music. I mean, I came into this music at a time when Bill Monroe defined what bluegrass was.
Right.
Bill Monroe, for the longest period, well up into the 70s, didn't change his music.
Right.
His shows were always the same. And even when he recorded new songs, they had the same arrangements, the same feel.
Mm-hmm.
And it took Ralph Rinsler and a bunch of other people kicking Bill Monroe in the butt to try to get him to expand his arrangements and make them sound a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
He just didn't want to do it. Well, you've read the book. I assume you've read that book.
Yes, I have. Uh-huh.
I am of the opinion that music is self-filtering, that over a period of time, all of the bad stuff will be lost.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll just get weeded out because the majority of people just won't be interested in it over the long run. And that they are going to pick out the elements of the music that are good for the music.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are times when that philosophy has been sorely tested over the years, but I still believe that that's true.
Mm-hmm.
So I can listen to the Osborne brothers doing some of those amazingly inventive arrangements and endings and kind of cringe at how formalized they are, how orchestrated they are, but still appreciate them musically.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you do a cut 15 or 20 years later and you listen to some of the modern bands and you hear those same elements coming in, the little bits and pieces, not the whole thing, but oh yeah, that came from this particular record that the Osborne brothers did back in 1968.
Right.
So there's a lot of that goes on. I remember Tony Trischka and Marty Cutler and all those folks who were doing experimentation with electrified banjo and putting it through phase shifters and playing rhythm and blues tunes.
Mm-hmm.
Banjos. I don't know if you ever heard of a band called the Wretched Refuge String Band.
No.
They were a New York band. It was based around Richie Schulberg, and
I don't know that.
Whoever was around at that time. Tony was in it. Marty Cutler was in it. Kenny Kosek, Bob Jones. I mean, there were dozens of people who played in this band, and they did whatever struck their fancy. They did a wonderful version of remember that Bobby Lewis song, "Tossin' and Turnin'."
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I couldn't sleep at all last night.
Right. I know the song. Uh-huh.
Right. They just had some wonderful things. They were a wonderful band to watch on stage. Not all of it was bluegrass, but you could hear where all of these influences that are now in Tony's music and Bella Fleck's music, they all come from that kind of Catholic interest in different styles of music and different influences.
Right.
So I really appreciate listening to these guys and knowing that they're just trying to keep an open mind and expand the boundaries. And some of it will work and some of it won't.
Right.
But I'm still a traditionalist.
And it sounds like you don't have a lot of fear that the old sounds are going to disappear because of innovation.
No.
You think it's going to, yeah.
One of the things that I really love to do is sing shape note music. I mean, some of these tunes go back 300 years or more.
Right.
And they haven't changed in that time. And you sing these things in a group with 20 or 30 people, and you know that these are universal sounds.
Mm-hmm.
This will always sound right. And no matter what anybody else does to shape note music, this is the stuff that's going to work.
Right.
So the same would be true with bluegrass. There's going to be certain Monroe Brothers or Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys tunes, or Stanley Brothers or Lonesome Pine Fiddlers, and those tunes just sound so right the way they're recorded. Why would anybody want to change them?
Right.
I'm okay with that.
Well, Neil, I think I've kind of taken up enough of your time and sort of exhausted my own immediate list. I could go on for hours, but maybe some other time. I really appreciate it. Did you have anything else you wanted to ask me as to just...
No, I don't think so. I'd be really interested to hear when your book is finally released.
Me too. I'd be really interested in finding out when I'm going to finish it. So would my wife. But so would Bill. You know, Bill, he stopped. But after the Rounders were, I think, terribly receptive to anyone who seemed reasonably serious and wanted to tell their story in a substantive way. And I was real specific with them from the outset that I wanted to kind of contextualize their story within a broader framework of the presentation of folk music and where it fit into post-revival activities. And they of course, they liked the ideas, but for a long time, Bill and Alan would send me these terse little emails that would say things like, "Progress?" ? And I said, "Well, Bill, I got a few other things to do, and I'm working every day on this project, actually." But it sometimes it gets involved, and sometimes I lose track of where I'm going, and sometimes I get distracted. But it plods on.
I think that these are interesting times for music, especially the distribution of music, because we're on the cusp of a major change.
I agree.
Music is going to be distributed, and who is going to control it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know which way it's going to go, but I see right now that there are people fighting to change this. And you can, whatever your position is on Napster or Nutella or any of those other mechanisms,
right.
you see that people are thinking about new ways to consolidate music source so that it doesn't necessarily have to come from New York or Nashville via a distributor on a major record label.
Right.
And there are a lot of smaller musicians who are taking advantage of that now. And I don't know how that's all going to shake out, but I think over the next couple of years there's going to be some really interesting things going on.
Oh, I sometimes think that the Rounders, feel that maybe it's okay that they're going to miss this next era. I sometimes think they're a little, I think Marion would leave it behind right now if it could be done comfortably and gracefully.
Yeah.
Because they're getting a lot of flack about what they've become, and they're trying to figure it out themselves. I don't know that they know what to do with it. They've been pretty candid about that.
Yeah.
I don't know that anybody does, as you put it.
They've been at it for a long time.
And, yeah.
Everything gets a little stale after the first 20 years.
And I keep going back and forth on my own position about Napster. I don't think I know what it is. I'd probably feel one way if I was a musician recording my own music than I do as a...
Well, that's the interesting thing, because there are many musicians who are strong proponents of Napster.
Right.
Who feel that it can only help them in the long run. And
right.
They let, who's the rock musician who uploads his current mixes of new songs that he's written?
Is that right?
Puts them right up on the internet. And it hasn't harmed his CD sales at all. So there's an argument to be made that this can actually help.
Right.
But once the lawyers get involved, all hope of rational discussion is lost.
Right. Well, Neil, thanks again. Thanks very, very much.
Well, I hope I helped.
You have.
Look forward to seeing this book come out.
Okay, thanks. Good night now.
Good night.
All right, bye-bye.